In this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan welcomes Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard to the podcast. Eric introduces himself as a PhD in mathematical physics who has held positions at institutions like MIT, Harvard, and Oxford. He was invited to provide his perspective on Terrence Howard's ideas that were discussed in a previous episode. Terrence Howard is an actor known for his roles in various films and TV shows, but he has also developed unconventional theories about mathematics and physics. Eric explains that he wanted to understand and steelman Terrence's position before critiquing it. He acknowledges that many in the scientific community have been dismissive of Terrence's ideas, but Eric wants to approach the conversation with an open mind. Terrence expresses gratitude for the opportunity to discuss his theories and thanks both supporters and critics for encouraging critical thinking. Eric begins by discussing Terrence's interest in the flower of life, an ancient geometric pattern found in various cultures. Terrence believes this pattern holds secrets about the nature of reality and may be a projection of a three-dimensional structure. Eric notes that Terrence's approach is reminiscent of Plato's allegory of the cave, suggesting there might be a higher dimensional reality projecting onto our perceived world. Terrence explains his belief that all energy is expressed in motion, all motion is expressed in waves, and all waves are curved. He argues that there are no straight lines in the universe, which leads to a discussion about the nature of geometry and mathematical abstractions. Eric points out that while perfect straight lines may not exist in nature, they are useful mathematical concepts. The conversation turns to Terrence's ideas about spheres and Platonic solids. Terrence has developed models he calls wave conjugations that he believes describe fundamental aspects of reality. Eric acknowledges the beauty and potential of these geometric models, but cautions against making definitive claims about their connection to physics without rigorous mathematical foundations. One of the most controversial aspects of Terrence's theories is his claim that 1 times 1 equals 2. Eric explains that this statement is mathematically incorrect, but tries to understand the underlying concept Terrence is attempting to express. Terrence clarifies that he uses this as a metaphor for challenging the status quo in mathematics and physics. Eric introduces the concept of the Terrence product as a way to formalize Terrence's ideas within standard mathematical language. He explains that while Terrence's operation is different from standard multiplication, it could be studied as its own mathematical object with specific properties. The discussion touches on topics like the square root of 2, the nature of prime numbers, and the concept of identity in mathematics. Eric points out areas where Terrence's understanding differs from conventional mathematics, but also identifies instances where Terrence's intuitions align with advanced mathematical concepts. Terrence presents his ideas about the fundamental forces of nature, suggesting that gravity is an effect of electricity rather than a fundamental force. He describes his models for what he considers to be electric and magnetic fields. Eric explains the current understanding of electromagnetism in physics, introducing concepts like the electromagnetic tensor and gauge potentials. While acknowledging Terrence's creativity, Eric emphasizes the importance of using precise language and established mathematical frameworks when discussing physics. He points out that many of Terrence's ideas, while intriguing, lack the rigorous mathematical foundation necessary to be considered viable scientific theories. The conversation touches on topics like quantum mechanics, particle physics, and field theories. Eric explains concepts like supersymmetry and the standard model of particle physics, contrasting these established theories with Terrence's more speculative ideas. A significant portion of the conversation focuses on the challenges faced by outsiders trying to contribute to scientific fields. Eric criticizes the current state of peer review in academia, arguing that it often stifles innovation and unfairly excludes unconventional thinkers. He contrasts the idea of peer review with what he calls elite review, suggesting that platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast can provide valuable opportunities for discussing and evaluating new ideas outside of traditional academic channels. Eric discusses the history of peer review, noting that it only became widespread in the 1960s and has since become a gatekeeping mechanism that can be abused. He argues that the scientific community needs to find better ways to engage with unconventional thinkers while maintaining rigorous standards. Terrence shares his experiences trying to present his ideas to academics and his frustration with the dismissive responses he's received. Eric sympathizes with Terrence's position while also explaining why many scientists react negatively to claims that challenge fundamental principles without sufficient evidence or mathematical rigor. Terrence introduces his concept of the Lynch pin, which he describes as the lowest common denominator of all matter and the internal dimensions of a torus. He presents physical models he has created to represent these ideas. Eric expresses interest in these models, comparing them to other geometric concepts in mathematics and physics. Eric sees potential value in Terrence's geometric intuitions, particularly in the context of engineering and design. He suggests that Terrence's models might have applications in fields like drone technology, noting the interesting properties of the structures Terrence has created. However, Eric also cautions against making sweeping claims about the fundamental nature of reality based on these geometric models alone. He encourages Terrence to focus on the practical applications and mathematical properties of his structures rather than trying to rewrite established physics. The conversation takes an interesting turn as Eric relates some of Terrence's ideas to concepts in music theory. He discusses the Pythagorean comma, even temperament, and the mathematical relationships between musical notes. This leads to a demonstration of how mathematical imperfections in our musical scale relate to some of the geometric imperfections in Terrence's models. Eric uses this analogy to illustrate how approximations and imperfect systems can still be incredibly useful and beautiful, drawing parallels between music, mathematics, and Terrence's geometric theories. Throughout the conversation, it becomes clear that Terrence's approach is highly interdisciplinary, drawing from various fields including mathematics, physics, engineering, and even spirituality. Eric acknowledges the value of this kind of broad, connective thinking while also pointing out the challenges it presents. Eric explains that in the past, it was more common to have polymaths who could work across multiple disciplines. However, the modern academic world has become highly specialized, making it difficult for outsiders to contribute meaningfully without extensive formal training in a specific field. The discussion touches on the tension between specialization and interdisciplinary thinking in science. Eric suggests that while specialization has led to significant advances, it has also created blind spots that might benefit from fresh perspectives like Terrence's. Both Eric and Terrence share personal experiences that have shaped their approaches to science and creativity. Eric talks about his encounters with brilliant individuals who challenged his own sense of intelligence and capability, leading him to question his role in the scientific community. Terrence discusses his experiences in the entertainment industry and how they relate to his scientific pursuits. He mentions collaborations with musicians and his work on growing diamonds, illustrating the diverse range of his interests and experiences. These personal stories provide context for understanding the motivations and perspectives of both Eric and Terrence, highlighting the human element behind scientific and creative pursuits. While Eric maintains a respectful and open-minded approach throughout the conversation, he doesn't shy away from offering critiques of Terrence's ideas. He points out instances where Terrence's claims contradict established scientific knowledge or lack sufficient evidence. Eric emphasizes the importance of precise language and mathematical rigor in scientific discussions. He suggests that many of Terrence's ideas, while creative and potentially valuable, are presented in a way that triggers immediate skepticism from the scientific community. The conversation includes a discussion of an honorary degree that Terrence received, which had been misrepresented as a PhD in chemical engineering. Eric uses this as an example to illustrate the importance of accurate representation of credentials and achievements in the scientific community. Despite his critiques, Eric sees potential in some of Terrence's ideas, particularly in the realm of engineering and design. He suggests that Terrence's geometric models might have applications in fields like drone technology or materials science. Eric encourages Terrence to focus on developing practical applications for his ideas rather than trying to rewrite fundamental physics. He suggests that by demonstrating the utility of his models in concrete ways, Terrence might gain more credibility and interest from the scientific community. The conversation touches on the possibility of collaboration between Terrence and mathematicians or engineers who could help formalize and develop his ideas within established scientific frameworks. Throughout the podcast, there's an underlying discussion about the nature of truth and how scientific progress occurs. Eric emphasizes that science is not just about being right, but about the process of discovery, including making mistakes and learning from them. He argues that the scientific community needs to find better ways to engage with unconventional thinkers while maintaining rigorous standards. Eric suggests that platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast can play a valuable role in this process by allowing for long-form discussions of complex ideas outside of traditional academic channels. The conversation touches on the concept of mass delusions in science and society, with Eric arguing that many widely held beliefs contain a mix of truth and falsehood. He encourages a more nuanced approach to evaluating new ideas, rather than dismissing them outright or accepting them uncritically. As the podcast concludes, Eric expresses appreciation for Terrence's creativity and passion while reiterating the need for more rigorous development of his ideas. He offers to continue the conversation and potentially collaborate on exploring some of Terrence's concepts further. Terrence expresses gratitude for the opportunity to discuss his ideas and shows openness to learning and refining his approach. Both Eric and Terrence acknowledge the challenges of bridging the gap between unconventional thinking and established scientific frameworks. The conversation ends on a note of cautious optimism, with the suggestion that while Terrence's current theories may not be scientifically valid in their entirety, there may be valuable insights and applications to be derived from his creative approach to geometry and physics. Overall, the podcast provides a fascinating exploration of the intersection between creativity, scientific rigor, and the challenges of communicating unconventional ideas in the modern scientific landscape. It highlights the potential value of interdisciplinary thinking while also emphasizing the importance of mathematical precision and empirical evidence in advancing scientific knowledge.